picture this, okay? We're in a Houston courtroom, like sweltering, The tension is palpable.
Yeah, you can just feel it.
All eyes are on Clara Harris, the successful dentist. I mean, she was driven, top of her game.
Absolutely.
But now, well, she's accused of something truly shocking, running over her own husband in a jealous rage.
A crime of passion. It's a case that really exposes the dark side of love,
Mm.
and betrayal.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even those seemingly perfect lives, the ones we think have it all figured out, can just fall apart in an instant.
In the blink of an eye.
So welcome to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Crime series. Today we're diving deep into the Clara Harris car murder case.
That's right.
Unpacking the layers of this whole twisted story, trying to understand the emotions, the motivations, everything that led to this devastating outcome.
Yeah, this isn't just your typical crime story. There's more to it, Ambition, the pressure to keep up appearances, the lengths people go to when they feel their world is crumbling.
You hit the nail on the head there. So let's rewind a bit. Before the headlines, before the courtroom drama, who was Clara Harris?
Well, she was the embodiment of the American dream. A Colombian immigrant who built this incredible life for herself, successful career, a seemingly happy marriage, raising twins with her husband, David.
They even ran a dental practice together. Talk about a power couple.
Right. From the outside, they had it all.
So where did things start to unravel? When did the cracks begin to show?
Well, like we often see, appearances can be deceiving. Underneath that perfect facade, things weren't as rosy. Clara began to suspect David was having an affair.
Oh, I bet that was just devastating. That feeling of your world being turned upside down, the trust you had just crumbling away.
Absolutely. It's that gut feeling that something's wrong, and it eats away at you.
So Clara, being Clara, a woman of action, decides to take matters into her own hands. She hires a private investigator to get to the bottom of things.
Determined to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be.
It shows a certain strength, I think, a need for answers. So what did the investigator find?
Well, sadly, it confirmed Clara's worst fears. David was indeed having an affair with his receptionist, a woman named Gail Bridges.
Wow, talk about a bombshell. That must have been a crushing blow. Suddenly, everything you thought you knew is called into question.
Absolutely, and the emotions that come with that. The betrayal, the rage, the utter devastation. It's overwhelming.
Especially for someone like Clara, who we know is very driven, successful. To have your world shattered like that, it's the double blow.
And her background might have actually amplified those feelings. Think about it. She was a successful immigrant woman striving to prove herself in a new country.
Oh, absolutely. That classic immigrant story. Working twice as hard, achieving the American dream, and then to have it all come crashing down because of infidelity. It's a tough pill to swallow.
It really adds another layer to her emotional state. It's not just a broken heart. It's a shattered sense of self.
So we have this volatile mix of emotions brewing: betrayal, anger, humiliation. And then things take a really dark turn on July 24th, 2002. What happened on that fateful day?
It's a day that unfolded with this chilling, almost cinematic quality. After getting confirmation of the affair, Clara rushes to the Hilton Hotel, the very place where David and Gail were meeting. And get this, she brings her teenage stepdaughter, Lindsay, with her.
Wait, her stepdaughter? That's a disturbing detail. Why on earth would she bring a young girl into such a volatile situation?
It's a question that hangs over this entire case. Was it a desperate attempt to appeal to David's sense of family, a cry for help? Or was it something more calculated, to ensure she had a witness?
Yeah. It's hard to say for sure, but it certainly adds another layer of tragedy to this whole situation. So what happened when they arrived at the hotel?
Well, what starts as a tense encounter in the lobby quickly descends into chaos. Witnesses describe yelling, hair-pulling, a complete meltdown. It's as if all those simmering emotions just erupted.
Wow. A public spectacle. Even in the most civilized settings, our primal instincts, that jealousy, that fight for what we believe is ours, it can take over in an instant.
And that's exactly what happened in the hotel parking lot that night. After the confrontation, Clara gets into her car with Lindsay still inside, and in a moment of what can only be described as blind fury, runs David over. Multiple times.
Multiple times. I mean, how do you even process that? The level of rage, the despair, and with a child in the car, no less. It's just unfathomable.
It's a chilling example of how quickly passion can turn deadly. And that act, captured on surveillance footage, became the centerpiece of the trial that would grip the nation. But that's a story for part 2.
Stay tuned, folks. We'll be back with more on the Clara Harris case after a short break.
We'll delve into the trial, the verdict, and explore the lingering questions surrounding this twisted tale of love, betrayal, and ultimately, violence. Don't go anywhere.
We're back with CrimePod Castle's Twisted Crime. And man, this Clara Harris case has just got so many layers to unravel.
Yeah, we left off with that image of Clara in the parking lot, using her car, well, as a weapon, really.
A life taken in a moment of absolute rage. And now the setting shifts to the courtroom.
A different kind of drama unfolds there.
The prosecution, they're trying to paint a very specific picture of Clara.
Right. They want the jury to see her as a woman scorned, driven by revenge.
They're pointing to the premeditation, the fact that she ran over David multiple times. That's not just an accident.
It speaks to intent, right? They're using that surveillance footage, really hammering home that point.
And I imagine they're also digging into her personality, this image of a successful, ambitious woman.
Absolutely. They're arguing that she was used to getting what she wanted, and when she felt like she was losing control, well, it pushed her over the edge.
So their case hinges on this idea that Clara couldn't handle the betrayal, the loss of control.
And chose to regain that control in the most destructive way possible.
But the defense, they're offering a completely different narrative.
They're saying this wasn't cold-blooded murder. This was a crime of passion.
A woman pushed to her breaking point, snapping under the weight of her husband's infidelity.
It's the classic sudden passion defense, arguing that Clara wasn't in her right mind.
Overwhelmed by emotion, not thinking clearly. But how do you prove something like that?
It's tricky. You're trying to convince the jury to look beyond the act itself.
To understand the mental and emotional state that led to it.
So the defense, they bring in witnesses to talk about Clara's character. They want to humanize her.
Paint a picture of a loving wife, a devoted mother, someone incapable of this kind of calculated violence.
But then there's that footage, the multiple passes with the car. How do you explain that away?
Did they downplay it? Offer some alternative explanation?
Well, they probably focused on the chaos of the situation, the adrenaline, the heightened emotions.
Arguing that Clara wasn't thinking straight, didn't even realize what she was doing.
Lost in that blind rage.
So it's a battle of narratives. Was it premeditation or was it passion? And in the middle of all this is Lindsay, the stepdaughter.
Imagine being a teenager thrust into this kind of spotlight.
Having to testify against the woman who raised you.
It's a heavy burden to carry. And her testimony, it could have swung the jury either way.
Did she portray Clara as cold and calculating, or did she show that emotional fragility?
Either way, it must have been incredibly difficult for her.
To relive that night, to process the loss of her father in such a horrific way.
This case, it really highlights the ripple effect of these kinds of crimes.
The victims extend far beyond just the individual who was killed.
Families, communities, everyone is impacted.
And then you have the media frenzy. This case was everywhere.
Clara Harris became a household name.
Every detail dissected and debated.
It makes you wonder about the influence of all that attention, how it shapes public perception.
Does it sway the jury? We'll delve into those questions when we come back. But for now, I want to leave you with this. How much weight should we give to this sudden passion defense?
Can intense emotion truly excuse a horrific act? It's something to ponder.
Welcome back to CrimePod Castle. We're here with part 3 of our deep dive into the Clara Harris case. This story, it just grabs you, doesn't it?
It really does. And I think it's because it forces us to ask some tough questions about ourselves, about love, betrayal, and the limits of human emotion.
Yeah, and we've seen how those emotions played out in Clara's story. From the initial suspicions to that night at the hotel, and of course the trial, where those emotions were on full display.
Absolutely. The prosecution pushing their narrative of premeditation, the defense arguing for that sudden passion defense, and now we're finally at the point where the jury has to decide.
The weight of evidence, the arguments, the testimonies, it all comes down to this. So what did the jury decide?
Well, after weeks of deliberation, they reached a verdict. They found Clara Harris guilty of murder.
Wow, murder. Not manslaughter or a lesser charge. That's a strong statement, isn't it?
It is, and I think it shows that the jury ultimately rejected that sudden passion defense. They didn't believe that Clara was so overcome with emotion that she wasn't in control of her actions.
They saw premeditation, a conscious choice to take a life.
Exactly, and the sentence reflects that. Clara Harris was sentenced to 20 years in prison.
20 years. That's a long time to think about the consequences of your actions.
It's a heavy sentence, and it really underscores the gravity of what happened that night.
It makes you think about the nature of justice, the price we pay for our choices.
And in this case, it wasn't just Clara who paid the price. Her stepdaughter, Lindsay, she lost her father and had to go through this incredibly public, painful ordeal.
What happened to Lindsay after the trial?
She chose to live a private life, away from the media spotlight. Understandably so.
Yeah, I can't imagine what she went through. To see her family torn apart like that, it's just heartbreaking.
It's a reminder that these crimes, they have a ripple effect. The damage goes far beyond the immediate victim.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways here? What can we learn from the Clara Harris case?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is the importance of communication, especially in relationships. When we let those feelings of resentment and suspicion fester, it can lead to some very dark
Like a
places.
pressure cooker, right? Eventually it's going to explode.
Exactly. So talking to each other, expressing those difficult emotions, it's so important. And if you can't do that on your own, seeking professional help, couples counseling, it can be a lifesaver.
I think another important takeaway is recognizing the signs of emotional distress in ourselves and in others. We often try to hide our struggles, but those feelings can manifest in dangerous ways.
Anger, recklessness, even violence. We need to be attuned to those signs. If we see them, reach out, offer support, encourage professional help.
The Clara Harris case is a tragic example of what can happen when those emotions go unchecked. It's a story that should make us pause and reflect on our own lives, our relationships, and how we handle those difficult moments.
And it's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope. There's help available, and we don't have to go through those things alone.
Well said. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Clara Harris case. We've covered a lot of ground here, and I hope it sparks some important conversations.
And if you're interested in hearing more compelling stories like this one, be sure to follow CrimePod Castle. We release new episodes every week.
You can find us on all the major podcast platforms and on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and as always, thanks for listening.